Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is for the lunar eclipse in Capricorn, which is happening, at least in my neck of the woods, on July 16th. And this will be, at least for me, at 4:38 p.m. It's actually at 24 degrees of Capricorn. I've been saying 25. I wonder why I saw 25, because I think I did see that somewhere. So it's actually 24 degrees of Capricorn. Okay. And so this is going to be something that is affecting the axis of Cancer and Capricorn. And in astrology, Capricorn rules the 10th house of career. And while the opposite sign, Cancer, rules the 4th house of home and family. And Cancer is the sign of the mother, Capricorn the father. And so the father represents outer authority. And the mother is more of the nurturer and the inner type of direction. And because the lunar eclipse is in Capricorn, it would behoove us to look at what we need to let go of that connects with ambition that is not serving us, that is somehow tainted. And of course, the ego is always going to be the culprit here, where the person is driven to achieve, but at what cost? You know, it's really interesting because I've been semi-obsessed about Elton John ever since I saw Rocket Man almost 3 weeks ago. And I've been just listening to his songs all the time, really kind of getting immersed in it. And even took out a book from the library about his life and everything. And one of the things that happened to Elton John is that when he was growing up, his father wanted him to be a banker, and his father wasn't there very much. So he really perceived a rejection from his father. And can you imagine Elton John being a banker of all things? This was a brilliant composer. I mean, I've been really listening to his earlier music because, you know, you hear the other stuff, it's more commercially popular, but his earlier music is sublime and very, you know, very sophisticated. And he went to the Royal Academy of Music. He was obviously a prodigy. He was obviously very precocious musically, artistically. And so for his father to want him to do something that was totally not what he was about is really a rejection of understanding the child's talents. And this is, so what we're talking about here too, I think when we're looking at this lunar eclipse, is letting go of that, maybe that voice inside that's the authority figure, okay, that tells you who you are. Because the 10th house is, you know, who you are, but sometimes you're not being who you are, even when you are in a particular occupation, because you're playing out somebody else's dictates. And sometimes that person wants to live vicariously through you. They didn't get a chance to be, you know, wealthy, working in a bank or some kind of a monetary institution, and so they want you to do that, or they want you to become the doctor because they want to have bragging rights, or whatever you want to call it. But if it's not something that you feel called to do, then it's a negation of the self. Now, it's not your ultimate self, which doesn't have a job title, but who you came here to be. You came here to be someone in a certain role fulfilling your talents. Elton John had certain talents that needed to be shared with the world. And actually, his father never came to one of his shows. Can you imagine that? His father was a musician. See, this is where the tragedy really comes from, is that a lot of times if parents dictate something to you, it's because secretly they mourn the loss of their own dreams that they didn't have the guts to pursue. And so they want you to let go of your dreams so that can make them feel better. I'm not saying this happens with every dysfunctional relationship, but I mean, that is certainly, I think, one of the causes, because I was just looking at an interview with Elton John, and he said, I can't understand why my father never came to one of my shows. And I'm like, duh, because he was jealous or envious, because he knew that that was what he wanted to do. Who knows? You know, I think he was about 22. He sounds like he was very young when he got married to Elton's mother, and she got pregnant and all that. So he might have resented that, the loss of his freedom, the loss of his dreams, and took it out on his child. And so this is really about inner and outer authority. The fourth house, Cancer, is related to nurturing. So even though we have recently had the solar eclipse in Cancer, the lunar eclipse in Capricorn highlights that sun, because the sun will be at the same degree in Cancer. And it's like, okay, how can I let go of the need to give away my power to somebody else? And how can I let go of that tendency and to stand in my power? And at the same time, highlighting self-care, nurturing oneself. How many people are running around nurturing everyone but themselves? We all have a responsibility to love ourselves, not just because that is the right thing to do, because God is part of us. So it's like, if you love yourself, it's like loving God. It's not narcissistic, because you don't just love yourself, you love other people too. But the other piece of this is that when you engage in self-love, you're sending a message that you're worth it. And that so that any time that you can live your life where you're not so much on a schedule, that every moment is accounted for, where you can just lay back during the day and you know that not everything's going to go to hell because you're kind of going off your schedule. And so with a lunar eclipse, it's really an inner understanding or an aha moment. And at the same time, there's a crisis. Something may come to a head, something that you've been avoiding. This could be on the job. This could be with an authority figure, where you say, oh my gosh, all this time, the reason I've been fighting with my boss is because I'm fighting with my father. I can't believe I'm still fighting with my father 20 years later. But my boss reminds me of my father and reminds me of how he didn't understand me. He just wanted what he wanted, but he really didn't want to take the time to understand me. And how does that feel? How does that feel for me? And what do I do that's self-sabotaging, where I'm attempting to meet my needs? Maybe it's through overeating. You know, that the fourth house can be food, the nourishment, the nurturing. You know, another thing that can come up at this time is that sense of like, if you feel empty, you know, in terms of achievements that are really your own and that are meaningful to you, not just for the sake of getting your ego stroked, but that you really, that are near and dear to your heart, you can realize that you don't have to turn to things like food, which can be the fourth house, to kind of comfort you. You can get that through, you don't need to be comforted, you need to be stimulated. I mean, that you are stimulated and you're feeling that sense of joy. But a lot of times what happens, people feel empty because of what they're doing. And when somebody feels empty, what is the first impulse? To fill the self. But this is the false self. This is the temporary self. Filling the body with unnecessary food. Making time for things that you really don't want to do. So filling a superficial schedule. But especially with fourth house, it would have to do with what type of food are you feeding your body? What type of lifestyle do you have? Is it go, go, go? Is it too frantic? Do you have enough time to just stop and smell the roses? And, you know, what is the meaning of accomplishment? What is the true meaning? To me, the true meaning isn't to prove to myself that I'm okay. It's, you know, it could be to publicize something so that other people can take advantage of it. If you really are a humble servant, you're going to want to give of yourself, the essence of who you are, to others, and you will learn from them just as much as they're learning from you. So maybe you're not doing what you should be doing work-wise, and that is reflected in your lack of interest in a particular area. Like maybe you're not enthused to go to work in the morning, and you don't really care when somebody asks you about issues that are connected to your work. You just are blasé because you just are not that into it. And so the sun is going to be in that fourth house. I'm talking about connected to the area of the fourth house, of what it represents, in Cancer. And so you may be feeling domestic. You may be feeling like you just want to be a homebody for a little while. Maybe you don't want to do much of anything, and you feel like you need that time to regroup. It could be coming home again to yourself, to what you've worked so hard for in some cases. And that's the other folly of, you know, being a workaholic, is that then you never have any time to enjoy what you've worked so hard for, in some cases sacrificed for. It's interesting, going back to Elton John, that later in life, he and his partner have adopted a couple of sons, and he says that he's going off that this is his farewell tour right now, because he said he wants to spend more time with his children. Well, the funny thing about it is that, you know, he adopted children, but he's still a workaholic. So he's repeating that pattern that happened to him with his father, and maybe he's realizing it and trying to make sure that his sons don't end up experiencing this lack of a relationship with him because he's hardly ever there. Because that was the other thing about his father, is that he was not physically there. I believe quite frequently, because he was in the military. So it's about not repeating patterns. And with the 4th house, there can be a strong connection to that past. We romanticize the past, and that's not necessarily how it was. It always seems a lot better over time. So the real thing is to honor that part of life where you may not get many pats on the back. This is one of those pitfalls about if you're thinking about becoming a parent, is that there may be a fear. I've actually read women verbalize this, because women still are expected to stay home because they have, if they're nursing their child, and just for obvious reasons. And so the point being that it's important to honor this part of life, even though people may not see those little achievements. Like when your baby first walks, they may be not there when the child does it. So you have to be able to generate enthusiasm for your subject matter, even though whatever it is that you are passionate about, you can't just go by popular consensus. And this is what self-love is about, is just choosing your path. And if you are somebody who is interested in a particular career, because this is definitely featured in July, this idea of, what did I come here to do? And some people may not have a definitive answer, and that's okay. You don't have to have one. It's just a matter of being willing to engage the issue that I think is the most important thing. And some people are simply terrified of anything that smacks of self-inquiry, because I think, this is my theory, is that if they have somebody kind of probing their psychological depths, what will they find there? And that when you're fearless, you're not hiding from anyone or anything. And so, anyway, you guys, I hope that you got something from this, and I hope that you have had a great solar eclipse in Cancer, and I'm looking forward to this lunar eclipse in Capricorn myself. I'm sure some of you are too. Take care. Bye.